Also joining us this evening, Angela Rose Howell, welcome. And of course, our former Permanent Secretary, Ambassador Marcy Gilbert Roberts. It's very good to have you with us this evening. I will be taking a roll call of clubs. So let me ask if there are any clubs that are visiting from outside of Jamaica. Could you identify your clubs and number of persons in your delegation? Okay, are there any clubs visiting from Division 25? Division 24? Division 23 West? '23 East?
Good evening, fellow Kiwanians, distinguished Kiwanians and guests. This is President Nikita from the Kiwanis Club of Worthington, Kingston. At this time, I'm joined by Secretary Lashawn and Kiwanian Nakita. Thank you so much for the invite. Wishing you all the best for the new year and have a great meeting. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, President Nikita. It's always good to have you and your delegation. Are there any other clubs from Division 23 West? I move to Division 23 East. '23 Central. You could
PD Paul.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, I bring you warm greetings from the Kiwanis Club of North St. Andrew. I'm DP Howard. I suspect there are other members from my club in the meeting, but I bring you warm greetings and look forward to an informative meeting.
Yes, DP Howard, and good evening, PD Paul. There are about 7 of us on. President Michael is also joining, and we look forward to a very interesting evening. And we expect others will be joining soon.
Thank you very much, DP Howard and PD Dwayne. It's good to have North St. Andrew here. Very strong delegation. Are there any other clubs from Division 23 Central?
Hi, this is President Kimberly from the Kiwanis Club of St. Thomas. Looking forward to a great meeting with you. Happy I was able to make it. And I do know that we have members here. No, PD Stacy is here, and I'm looking forward to more persons joining soon.
Thank you very much, President Kimberly.
You're welcome.
Yes. Are there any other clubs that didn't get a chance to? Yes, good evening.
This is VP Karen from the Kiwanis Club of Constant Spring. We are 3 in numbers presently, and we're expecting more to join later. Thank you so much for inviting us to your meeting this afternoon.
Thank you very much, VP Karen. It's always good to have you with us as well. Are there any other? Yes.
Good evening. We're from Cyber Connect. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We're currently 2 in number.
Thank you very much, Cyber Connect. Are there any SLPs with us this evening?
Yes, KRO Courtney Palmer here from the Kingston College Key Club. Only myself is here at the moment, but I'm looking forward to a very informative meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here as usual. You're the lone soldier, or you're looking, others will come shortly, all right?
Yes, I'm a lone soldier at the moment.
Okay then. Are there any other SLPs with us?
Good evening, everyone. This is CP Nicholas Joels from UEMONA CKI. Our delegation is at 3 currently and hoping more members will join. Looking forward to a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CP Nicholas. Are there any guests of Kiwanians or visitors that I did not acknowledge?
Oh, PD Paul.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Here you really see as usual.
Yeah, so honored guest, thank you so much for being here. It's good to have you.
You're most welcome. Thanks.
Oh, PD Paul, I have a guest on as well this evening. My friend, Dr. Osric Forrest, I think signing in from Colombia today.
Thank you very much, Kiwan and Dr. Andrew Burton. Welcome to your guests as well.
It's Colombia, South America.
Yes, a Jamaican who's visiting Colombia, but not a Colombian.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for joining. Are there any other guests with us?
I too have a guest here, Tori Brooks, a friend of mine. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Kiwan and Avian. Are there any guests? Are there any other guests on our platform? I see. Welcome to Miss Delita McCallum. Thank you very much for being here, and also my colleague, Dr. Rohan Clark. It's good to have you joining us this evening. Okay, that's it, President. If not, over to you.
PD Paul.
Yes, DP.
I think I saw President-elect Michael from Uganda. I think I saw him on the list when I was looking at the other attendees.
Okay, welcome, President-elect Michael. I know he's all challenges at times.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much, DP Stewart. Over to you, President Richard.
Okay, thank you. For apologies, DP Leo apologizes. I have no other apologies. We will now move to recognition of birthdays and anniversaries, and Vice President designate Newton Ramdale will take over at this time.
Thank you, President Richard. Good evening, everyone. Well, for birthdays and anniversaries this week, today, the 31st of August, we have one special one. Kiwani and Joseph Francis and Annette are actually celebrating their anniversary today. So we need to give him a call. I was looking to see if he's on, but I don't see him. Also, on the 4th of September, which I think is Saturday, past Chairman Carrington Grant will be celebrating his birthday. I thought I would have seen him on because I noticed that the Sarge gave him a big welcome last week. And if you look at the Sarge, AKA past director Gladstone Mallet, AKA Benny, you might be seeing him smiling tonight, and that's because his wife Faye, who happens to be one of my favorite persons, probably the only one in the family I like, but I shouldn't say that in public. He celebrates her birthday on the 4th also, so we should all remember to give Faye a call on Saturday. I'm now, through President Richard, inviting anyone else who is having a special occasion, birthday, anniversary this week, next week, to let us know about it so we can celebrate with you. No one? Okay, well, before I hand it back over to President Richard, I just want the Sarge to know your wife is a very good friend of mine, sir. If you charge me tonight, I'm going to tell her.
No, sir, I wouldn't do that, sir. You're a friend of mine too. And I'll pass the message on to her, sir.
Okay. We'll now have Kiwani's education, and Secretary DLG William Reeson will share Kiwani's education with us.
Thank you very much, President Richard. Good evening, fellow Kiwanians, guests, and SFP members. This evening, I'm going to turn our attention to the origin of the motto of Kiwanis International, we build, as well as speak on the practice of raising a toast. Tonight I'm going to speak on the practice of raising a toast at the termination of our meeting. It is interesting, however, that so deeply committed are Jamaican Kiwanians that they innovated the reciting of the objects at all Kiwanis Club meetings as a third agenda item, following the singing of national anthem and invocation. This practice of reciting objects is now emulated at all Eastern Canada and the Caribbean district conventions and by many clubs throughout Canada and the Caribbean. In the same vein, the practice of raising a toast to Kiwanis International and a friendly Jamaica at the termination of our meetings had its genesis in the 1970-71 administrative year under Lieutenant Governor Gordon Mazuka, when the Friendly Jamaican campaign was initiated. Supported by the Jamaican Tourist Board, the campaign had the objective of exposing visitors to the warmth, friendliness, and hospitality of Jamaicans. It was so intended to increase conviviality, cordiality, and improve interpersonal relations among Jamaicans. This campaign was promoted by all Jamaican clubs. Over the years, the Kiwanis Club of Kingston has adopted as its practice of raising a toast to Kiwanis International and Jamaica, land we love. Fellow Kiwanis, I hope that was informative. Thank you, President Richard, over to you.
Yes, thank you, DLG Willie. And we continue to wish your wife well on her recovery. We now move to the introduction of the guest speaker or feature event, and I now hand over to PD Paul Peart, President Designate.
Thank you very much, President Richard. Dr. Tristan Kramer is the new director of the University's Institute of Criminal Justice and Security. A senior democratic governance and political specialist, Dr. Kramer possesses over 2 decades of expertise in high-level multilateral and bilateral relations. She's a returning proud UWI alumna, having earned her Bachelor of Science double major in both sociology and international relations from the Mona campus in 1999. She's also the holder of Master of Arts in Diplomatic Studies with distinction from the University of Westminster in the UK in 2001 and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Criminology from the University of Kent in the UK in 2010. Dr. Kramer was previously at the Commonwealth Secretariat, where she served as head of the Commonwealth Secretary General's Good Offices for Peace. She was also lead political advisor for the Caribbean region. She served as Assistant Conference Secretary for the biannual Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting between 2017 to 2021, and also as Assistant Conference Secretary for Commonwealth Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting and the Commonwealth Ministerial meetings on Belize and Guyana. She also previously served as head of office for the Commonwealth Deputy Secretary General Political and was elected as a chairperson of the Commonwealth Staff Association between 2019 to 2021. Dr. Kramer also has significant high-impact civil society engagement experience. She served as international capacity building and accountability coordinator for Amnesty International Secretariat, UK, principal consultant at the Point Research and Consulting, overseeing social cohesion, capacity building with women and youth, civil society organizations in Israel and Bosnia Herzegovina, policy and research manager, Female Prisoners Welfare Project at Hibiscus Initiatives in the UK, and as a former lecturer at the University of Kent and University of Greenwich. As a researcher, her publications include over a dozen technical papers and equally as many presentations. Her PhD research focused on the experiences of the disproportionately high percentage of Black foreign women in prisons in England. It impacted the sentencing regime for foreign nationals in the United Kingdom and influenced prison reforms relating to the experience of foreign nationals in the UK. She has a strong background in organizational development, building strategic partnerships, and project monitoring and evaluation. This is coupled with expertise in mediation and negotiation, crime and violence prevention, restorative and transitional justice, political engagement, elections, coalition governance, and gender equality. Fellow Kiwanis and guests, please join me in welcoming Dr. Tressan Kramer. Dr. Kramer.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul, for that introduction. And thank you, Kiwanians, for inviting me to your session this evening. It's not often that I'm a featured speaker, but I'm very grateful for the invitation and to share with you today. I was asked to speak to you on justice for all in the Caribbean, and I thought about how to approach this and what might be best to communicate what that means for not just us in Jamaica, but for the region. Firstly, as Paul just said, I've just come back to Jamaica. Previously, I was at the Commonwealth Secretariat for the last, I think, 10, 11 years. And before that, as Paul said, working in other countries, Bosnia, etc. That, I think, gave me a different or a wider appreciation of what justice is, what justice means. And I say that because when you think of what is just and criminal justice and justice, oftentimes persons limit it to what happens in the courts and think of, okay, this is a matter for lawyers and to discuss how it is dealt with in a judicial way. So I thought I'd expand the discussion around what exactly constitutes justice. I've taken up a position at UWI, and I'm grateful for that, to be home as director of the Institute for Criminal Justice and Security. It has a regional mandate to support the region in not just research, but in also advocacy around these areas. What does that mean, and how will the Institute probably go about looking at some of these issues in my view going forward? And perhaps the discussion that I'm hoping to have with you this evening would locate some of my thoughts in regards to how the Institute can probably best serve the region. And I'm very eager to hear your own views as to what an institute such as the Criminal Justice and Security should be doing and could be doing to further be more tangible to how it affects your life. But when we think of the Caribbean, what is the mission of the Caribbean community, that regional body that we say kind of hold us together in our same values, fundamental principles, brings our sameness and our differences together collectively as one? What is it? The mission of CARICOM is to deepen integration and build resilience, among other things. In regards to the issue of justice, I've selected 3 out of the broad areas of the mission of CARICOM. The first is to affirm the collective identity and facilitate social cohesion of the people of the region. Secondly, to ensure social and economic justice and the principles of good governance are enshrined in law and embedded in practice. And thirdly, systematically reduce poverty, unemployment, social exclusion, and their impacts. Those are 3 of the missions. There are others. And its core values, the regional body says that it has an abiding respect for human rights, the rule of law, And it takes action to ensure social and economic justice, as I said. They provide proactive visionary leadership for promoting and reinforcing the spirit and commitment to regional integration. So reinforcing all of those things that I said earlier, that accounts for the mission, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and operational excellence. And I see some colleagues here who may have comments on that as to how effective they think we are doing in achieving as a region all of these things. But when we speak then of justice for all, what are we talking about? The term justice sometimes creates dichotomies in methodology. How do we go about achieving it? So, for example, you think about, some persons will say it's about diversity and inclusiveness, where diversity will probably ask, who is in the room? And equity, which is about fairness, also relating to justice, would respond, who is trying to get into the room but cannot get in? Whose presence is in the room but is under threat of perhaps not being there? Diversity would ask, how many more of a particular marginalized group do we have or have we engaged with this year than we have the last year? And equity would probably say, what conditions have we created that maintain certain groups as being marginalized? Inclusion would probably look at, is this environment, or is the environment we have safe for everyone to feel like they belong? Justice would probably ask, whose safety is being minimized and possibly sacrificed to allow others to feel comfortable maintaining their own space and perhaps sometimes dehumanizing views. Diversity would probably say, is it separatist for us to provide all the funding and all the needs of a particular marginalized group in a particular space? Equity would probably force us to think, is this the right thing to do? Do they feel safe isolated? And is it the right thing that we are othering them, that they're different from us? So it challenges us to think through these terms sometimes that we use interchangeably. And so by substituting sometimes diversity and inclusion, when we are undertaking transformative efforts to promote equity and justice, sometimes there's a risk that we avoid or sometimes deliberately obstruct recognizable change and how we get there. So justice is really what is felt morally. Am I being treated fairly? And how that is being delivered. And that is why accountable systems are so important in justice. So it is a concept. Why is all of this important? Again, it's a that justice is a concept on ethics and law that means that people behave in a way that is fair, equal, and balanced for everyone. And so it is probably the most binding part of morality. And that's a very powerful, yet some would say justice is aspirational then, because we can't have true justice. It always has to be balanced with some sort of assessment as what is fair to all. And so it is celebrated in different spheres of life in different ways. You have justice in the political realm, in the economic realm, in the ecological realm, how we engage with civil society and institutions, and how we have and generate public debate, and how we draw information from that debate to inform fair policies and fair procedures and delivery of public services to citizens in the Caribbean. And so in the Caribbean context then, what are some of these challenges across the governance spectrum in regards to fairness, in regards to how persons feel just? Am I being treated fairly? And can I trust that I will be justly treated. And some of the challenges, rising inequalities, some would say they are that's a product of some national policies and laws and institutions, and sometimes sociocultural norms and practices, governance deficit, challenges with corruption, how income is distributed, and how persons are able to access opportunities, employment opportunities being perhaps one of the most desired, and where persons, especially our young persons, are finding difficult to access. All of this is combined sometimes with other factors of discrimination in regards to sometimes gender, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, race, disability, etc. But there are sometimes some other fundamental challenges, and our own country and some in the Caribbean have tried to address all of these, and to some measure there has been success. For example, as simple thing as legal identity challenges, that's an issue of justice where, babies were perhaps not being registered. That's an issue of fairness and justice if their identity is not assumed. Gender inequality as well. And in some Caribbean countries, the issue of race is very much pronounced. And some would say it is pronounced probably in all, considering our historical antecedents, but it's probably how we have chosen to engage with them in a way that makes some feel more comfortable and some perhaps less, and somewhere we have found a balance and we're comfortable with that balance. And recently in the multilateral space, the Sustainable Development Goals is a mechanism that ultimately is geared towards finding justice for all, leaving no one behind. That's a principle of justice. And the human rights principles of equality, non-discrimination, making sure that this is indispensable to all across the spectrum of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so when you talk about that, you're also looking at how you develop your institutions, how you provide that the provision of security and justice must be built with strong stakeholder engagement in order to inform how persons receive that, and how civil society is engaged in consultative processes, and how citizens themselves are engaged. It's also key then to ensure some sort of equilibrium in how persons perceive themselves in the ecosystem of justice. Key businesses also very important. So the SDGs call for leaders across the world, we're talking about the Caribbean now, to uphold all of these principles concurrently with the right of participation in all of these things across. Now, this provides tensions and strains, particularly where resources are tight and where, for example, a region like the Caribbean have small, vulnerable states that do not have, that many have high debt and still are being held to the same standards of democracy and of trying to ensure that its citizens feel like they're fairly and justly treated. It's a difficult thing to achieve. And so what is particularly critical in such a shrinking civic space where there is enhanced tensions is dialogue, to ensure that persons can express what their feelings are about how these services are being delivered to them, and that government, opposition, and civil society can together perhaps work concurrently to address as much as possible. And so this is why, to some, as I said, it is almost aspirational, this concept of justice. But to ensure society maintains order, it is very important that society also has mechanisms that encourage peaceful conversations, that encourage discussions around all of those things we spoke of earlier: inclusivity, diversity, and equity, access to all. And when we say access to justice for all, that's another issue. Who feels like the formal system of justice can be beneficial to them if they're aggrieved? The cost of fair access to justice is arguably prohibitive when you think of law, going to the police and the power dynamic there for certain marginalized communities, making your complaints, following it through with the lawyers, etc. So if you look at the justice system.
Oh, I thought, George, I didn't know you was on.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry. That was an interruption. Just go ahead.
No problem. So when you look at the formal system of justice, some would say it is sometimes intimidating to those who need it the most, but yet it should be accessible to all. And these are some of the questions that our elected officials are continually pressured to find solutions to. And our discussions and what we do in our own lives, what organizations like Kiwanis do, even the smallest bits in terms of encouraging dialogue as you do this evening, and as you do your work in communities, it's extremely important to understand what are the prohibitive factors of justice, and sometimes how can you make access to justice less intimidating to each individual, or for want of a better phrase, to the common man. And how do we hold institutions and public servants accountable in the region? How good are we at that? And what is the progress that we're making in terms of the sustainable development agenda that has been agreed and which all our countries have signed up to? How is that working in terms of benefits to our people? And one of the areas for the Caribbean region that is particularly of concern, we know, is the high levels of homicide and violent crime. It presents a particular challenge. The cycles of violence, it has evolved into systems driven by complex factors and multiple actors across political, social, and economic spectrum. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Kitts and Nevis, Guyana, all provide examples of such complex systems of societal disenchantment that have resulted in high levels of homicide and violent crime. One of our Caribbean countries at the moment, Trinidad and Tobago, they're even experiencing issues of terrorism and having some of their citizens sign up for this across other jurisdictions. That's right next door. So we're not necessarily immune to other aspects of violent crime that sometimes we think are very far away. And so how we, I think, look at justice as something that each of our citizens need to feel residing very close to them is particularly important in how one can stem violent crime and address how individuals feel, whether they feel helpless about it or not. And an example of that I'll give to you is one country in one Commonwealth country, Rwanda, as many of you may know, experienced immense trauma through genocide. And there are other complex governance issues there, some good, some bad. But the issue of moving on with life became necessary to maintain a nation state. And so to do that, they found that it was extremely important to face head-on the issue of justice. And the common man needed to feel that there was some justice to what had just happened to them. The fact that their neighbor next door came in to their own house and murdered their husband, wife, and everybody in front of them. How do I now live with this person and continue to maintain a nation state? That country now frontally had to face, you call the basics of justice. And so they went back to basics. And what was devised was the Gakasha courts, where it's a system of communal justice. The court system could not handle this matter. It had to be taken to the community in a mass way, where elders were brought to the community and persons who were the perpetrators were brought in series of dialogue, not just in a restorative justice fashion, but to say what moved them. And those who felt like they were victims of this, or who were victims of this, to say, this is what you did to me. This is what I saw you did. This is what it feels like. And then some sort of restitution or some agreement be arrived at as to how the perpetrator could probably atone for that. There's no way Rwanda could imprison all of these people, or there would be no nation state. And so they found this innovative way to ensure that justice was done in what for that context was a fair way. And some of our societies and our communities in the Caribbean have to perhaps, I think, also think about breaking down the formalities of the justice system so that persons feel connected to it at that level, at the community level, so that they can feel and see accountability. And I'm hoping that we can start some of that conversations across the Caribbean through the Institute of Criminal Justice and Security, and some of our indigenous communities across the Caribbean still to some extent practice some of these methods. Today I was having a discussion, and I also say, if we think about it, some of these methods are also practiced closer to home in some of our most violent communities, but they have been garrisonized. And what is the methodology of breaking that down? But you can't exclude those who are seen to be causing the issue. Is there a way that we can incrementally have these conversations and face what's happening in these communities? Because in a way, the persons who are seen as dons are sometimes viewed by the marginalized as the ones who give them access to justice. It may be difficult to understand outside of that terrain if you're not experiencing some issues of social inequality that they are. But in their view, that is access to justice that they can afford. So it challenges us to think through, how do we frontally face some of these issues and look at what are the better parts of some of these interventions and what is worth engaging with, and how can we engage with some of these, if at all. We also need to look at the policing system and the correction system. Policing is not just about securitization. You have other aspects. It's about maintaining order. But there are ways to also maintaining order. You see, it's a social contract, and there has to be trust in the systems. And so that is one area as well, where I think the Caribbean has some challenges with this high crime rate. How do we also progress securitization efforts, but we also try to find workable ways where that can be efficiently and effectively integrated with how we encourage the community to also police themselves, even in marginalized spaces. The correction system and its effectiveness is also one area that I think the Caribbean also struggles with in terms of its challenges. When someone is punished and imprisoned, unless you have been sentenced to death or you have been given life or a long sentence, you have an end date. And so you'll be released at some point. One of the functions of prison is rehabilitation. And perhaps that's an area that we really need to look at and to see how is it that we can perhaps engage with this in a more effective way, considering the challenges we have. And I know this is also aspirational because all of this requires resources that governments don't have, etc. And I think this is where we also need to look at how foreign policy engages with our needs and our resources. Ministry of Foreign Affairs in all of our countries sometimes have, they lobby all the time and try to get some of these resources for us through multilateral institutions. It becomes more difficult when we do them individually. We're small states. And sometimes that is where now the integration effort of CARICOM becomes very important. How do we negotiate for these kinds of resources for our needs? How do we do them singularly, and how do we do them as a team? Recently, for example, one we saw where within CARICOM, we also know that there are strains in that political dynamic. The OECS has their own grouping within CARICOM itself, and that also poses challenges to many things. Recently, with the sourcing of vaccines, the OECS got their diplomatic endeavors, perhaps a little bit more ahead of some others. And these are some of the issues that we, I think, collectively as a region need to look at how persons are seeing systems work for them and how institutions and regional collectivity is felt by persons in their daily lives, in how they are treated through public services. And so I've spoken about community dialogue and the importance of that. But just as I've just mentioned the issue of trust and how individuals and citizens hope to and look to institutions to provide that steer for them, it is important then for this kind of dialogue and for groups such as Kiwanis to foster and encourage this discussion in your own communities, as I know you do well across the world. This is transformative, and in certain discussions, when we're having negotiations, you call it the trigger for transformative action, homegrown solutions to issues. It's the kind of engagement and initiatives that encourages deeper societal institutional transformation than which can perhaps be coined in a room of four walls with bureaucrats. And this is why also securitization methodologies by themselves are unlikely to effectively work, because human beings are part of a complex social ecosystems, and it has to be seen in that integrated context. But all of this requires something else: political will and commitment. And so how do we encourage that? And again, it is discussion from civil society that puts pressure on political will and moves political will to take certain actions sometimes. And that brings us to another issue of justice: electoral justice, fairness, the administration of good elections that persons feel represent their their vote, one man, one vote. Fortunately, within the Caribbean space, we have improved on that, and I think Jamaica has an excellent record where our electoral administration is concerned. However, it's not something that you can sit on and say, okay, the EMB over there is doing well, we can leave it alone. I've, in my years in doing that kind of work at the Commonwealth, I always say when I speak to groups like yourselves and to governments, etc., that you should always keep an eye on that institution, because changes are sometimes sudden, and it needs to know that it has the eye of citizens looking at how its operations and administrations are being transparently implemented, etc. So I think that covers a wide area of how I see and how the Institute of Criminal Justice and Security will be looking to develop its program of work for the next 3 years across the region, so that we are actually doing what I call applied research, where we're working with governments in the communities and multilateral institutions as well to come up with homegrown solutions so that our citizens feel that access to justice is closer and feel less intimidation by the formalization of the process. To be effective, justice needs to be seen and felt by citizens. When citizens feel treated fairly, and when they feel like, even if it's not even keel at the moment, but there is a considered effort to treat us fairly across a milieu of interconnected areas, that will help to realize, or not, if not done properly, what good governance is. And essentially, you need justice to ensure good governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kramer, for that really insightful presentation. I would like to now open the floor for questions. I think I've seen a couple of questions in the chat, but I prefer if the persons who have posed questions in the chat, if they would verbalize the issue that they would like to have, some further elaboration on. I noticed I saw Warren McDonald, and I saw something from President Richard. So let me ask Warren first. Can you go ahead, Warren, and tell us what it is you wanted to know?
Thank you, DP Stu. As my question had said, I am aware of this street law Caribbean. It was launched a couple years ago, and it's a body in collaboration with the Faculty of Law at UWI and the Open Campus UWI, with the objective of educating the Jamaican public on the laws, to demystify the laws so people can understand what governs them, I haven't heard much about it since. I know Dr. Malcolm and a few of the lecturers at the university were involved in it. I was wondering if that had any links to the faculty, the body which the Institute of Criminal Justice and Security, if there was any linkage between that body and this one, because they both seem to be linked to the University of the West Indies. So I just wanted if she could add some clarity to that.
Okay, Dr. Kramer.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, for that question. I don't know at this time Whether there is a link at the moment, I could find that out for you. Certainly Street Law Caribbean sounds like an effort and an initiative that the Institute would be interested in partnering with and doing some work with. So I'll ask my team tomorrow if we have worked with them in the past. I started recently, so I don't have all of the historical information at hand, but I'll certainly look into Street Law Caribbean, because it is one of the, it sounds like one of those, an initiative that demystifies the process and makes it less intimidating, which is what access to justice is about. And we would, I think, benefit from seeing and hearing more from them. So I look into that.
That's what I was thinking. There's some overlap, you know, in the objectives. So I would hope that there's not a duplication of effort, you know.
Okay, thanks for that, Director Warren. President Richard, would you like to elaborate further on some of the comments I think you have put in the chat?
Yes, well, basically what I'm saying is that and I think Dr. Kremer, Ms. Kremer mentioned it, that the under-resourcing. Now, if you were to just construct new facilities, the operating costs would be reduced. So the persons are trained, they have the instruments to assess risk, self-harm, needs, everything. But at the end of the day, the resources are just not there to implement and sustain programs. The estate is derelict, and the facilities require enormous amounts of personnel to not only maintain, but also to man. And somehow persons or policymakers really are not really prepared to make that transition. You also have the challenge of reality. The process of law, if you just look at it as a business process, if you're even looking at production and output, take a simple case of a tenant in arrears and someone wants to evict that tenant. The process is cumbersome. The time is extended. We don't have winter. And at one point you have people at the court offering their services to get the tenants out, not through the court. They're telling you, look, we see you coming every day in your black suit. Are you an attorney? No. Do you have nothing better to do than come here and waste your time? And they then tell you, look, I work for all these people. You just tell me the problem and we have a five-phase intervention to get the tenant out. Mm-hmm. And whether the persons are whatever walk of life they're from, people subscribe to these persons as well. So if you have an inefficient justice system, the attorneys representing the clients don't even explain to them the 7 or 8 steps through to eviction. If you go for a divorce, the top divorce attorneys don't even explain. The most they'll do is open 7 files as you walk in. So when people don't have that knowledge and the system is cumbersome, before the divorce is complete, you hear that one of the parties have dropped out, right? Where one of the spouses has hired somebody to deal with the matter in their way. So the cycle of violence, the recidivism with the prisons, the culture or subculture of justice that has evolved is very, very, very difficult now to change, right? So irrespective of anybody on this platform, when you have a problem and it's personal, your daughter gets raped, you know who did it, some people take another route, okay? And I think this now is the new norm. And how do we change? The police need to amend 600 pieces of legislation. You can't even move a window wiper legally. right? Because he's not a hawker or peddler. So, you know, these are some of the challenges that if you look at it holistically, which branches can we break first to, you know, overcome and, you know, achieve a roadmap. The British attorney said to me once, she comes to Jamaica to do appeals free to get practice. Because she says in the UK, persons go to the Crown Court, they get there, the judgment is delivered, and they said, I've had my day in court. In Jamaica, whether it's the government or the individual, the constant appeals and so seem endless as well. And it could be a lack of confidence in the initial judgments or not wanting to accept the judgment that is handed out, you know. So it's a real challenge, yeah.
But President Rich, okay, since you didn't phrase it as a question,
Yes, so
I
I'm
want
just
to
saying
ask.
to the,
Yeah,
to
I understand. I understand. I'm just
in terms of our overall view of the criminal justice system and these challenges, what sort of assessment is being done to determine where do we start and how? In an intervention way, yeah.
Dr. Kramer?
Thanks, Mr. Reese, for that question. You and I know that there is no real easy answer to that one. There's been a number of reviews and assessments and reports, etc. We know that. And there's one thing that you said is the state of, for example, the prison estate at the moment. How do you even grapple with changing that? Because it is so complex. And where would you start? And perhaps then, I know that recently there's been talk of, you know, building another prison estate, etc. But that by itself is just the facility, which is welcomed. But then aligned with that, we would hope is that there are also some procedures and policies that would inform how that rollout happens if and when it happens later down. And perhaps in another forum, we could then examine how is that, what are the discussions that have been ongoing around that. And I wouldn't want to preempt that without being part of some of those discussions. I have not been. And so we would need to look at what are the thought processes and how that could be done. But how do we, secondly then, are there things we can do outside of the prison estate because if persons feel that the system is just stuck in a cycle, you know, you mentioned the rate of recidivism, etc. How then do we prevent that rate increasing, and what can we do at community level that we can probably stop some of these things entering the formal space or going into homicides and so on? If persons feel like they can't get justice and they have to go another route, then I think that's where we have continued increases in violent crime and an expansion in also the prison estate. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's a hard one to grapple with, but perhaps starting outside is perhaps maybe the best way, and it would probably require much more studied efforts and conversations to identify what is the correct entry point. I'm not prepared to even venture such a solution at this point, but it's certainly important to have informed that evidence-based dialogue to inform that kind of policy making.
Yeah. Okay.
Who else from the floor would like to ask a question?
The second thing I would suggest to state Congress leverage us. There are tens of thousands of veterans, a virtual army.
I'm getting somebody has a.
Suggesting that we all kind of merge, and Sam and I are going to talk later about merging our efforts so that we're not.
There are a couple of mics that are open. I'm going to ask you, please.
Take 25 to 30 packets.
I think we just need to silence.
Unmute yourself, President. And Dr. Kramer, you may unmute yourself for me, please. I just mute everybody.
Okay.
I have a question though.
Okay, go ahead, DP.
Good evening again, Dr. Kramer. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for being with us today. My question is a little different here. It is the Maroons and Maroon Town. What would be your views on the topic that they seem to feel that they are not subject to the laws of the land? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. The issue of the Maroons. I don't know if it is that they don't feel that they are subject to the laws of the land. I wouldn't want to agree with you necessarily on that without further information from them that is indeed so. And I suppose your question is coming from the issue recently that happened in that location in a compound. Very important to, I think, look on the background and the history of that community and how it was formed. I think our history tells us that the Maroon community was formed by runaway enslaved persons who joined Tainos, remaining Tainos in the hills. And together they formed a community which was known as the Maroons, which fought back against the British vehemently until they came to talks as to how to squash the beef, which resulted in what the Maroons call, I think, what is termed as the treaty between the Maroons and the British for peace. And there's some contentious clauses in that make some persons look at that agreement as one that did not ultimately represent what we would be fully proud of in terms of the historical recollections of the Maroons. And I say that to say, and I link it to another, I mentioned earlier, the situation of Rwanda. There are other countries as well, civil war situations. Most times, to end a war, there has to be negotiations, and there are favorable and unfavorable parts of those agreements. And ultimately, the result is a compromise. However, the history of the Maroons, a part of it, well, all of it represents the historical background of Jamaica, both the parts that persons feel very comfortable with and the parts that persons are also extremely uncomfortable with. And that's not just with the Maroons, that's with all of us. And I think that's how we eventually came to a motto that says, out of many, one people. So the recent issue with them, what I understood happened is that the police visited to check on some marijuana production or something like that. And the Maroons felt that that visit was not done in a way that respected them and the precedents, etc., etc. And when I hear some of these conversations, I think about it in I always think as a conflict resolution specialist, and what is being said and what isn't being unsaid. And so you like to isolate the issue So what caused the aggrievement in the first place? The Maroons are asking for justice in regards to what they see as their ecological space. Would that ecological space just be in their interest, or would it also result in justice for all if they get what they are asking for, the preservation of the cockpit country and it being exempt from certain mining, etc.? Question one. Question two is how the intervention of the police was received. Now, what we do know is that the Maroons have a model of policing that has worked in the past, where they police themselves. And that's something possibly that we can replicate in other communities. And my understanding as to how that has worked is that there's always been good communication with the police and the chiefs as to how that happens. It seems that on this particular occasion that broke down. And so we need to ask what happened there. I wouldn't want to think that the Maroons are saying that they are no longer subjected to the laws of Jamaica. What I perhaps think they want to articulate is that they'd like the autonomy that has previously been respected to continue, and perhaps more enhancement, or what they see as a diss of their community and policing precedent not to happen again. That's how I saw it. And I think for such a precious historical group and legacy that we have in Jamaica. In fact, I made a comment regarding the Maroons that when Jamaica made its bid for the Blue Mountains, the Blue and John Crow Mountains, to be recognized as UNESCO heritage site, our engagement and utilization of the agency and story of the Maroons was essential for us to get that done. All of these things are give and take and discussions. And so I'm not necessarily sure that they say they are not subjected to our laws. That's a different conversation if that's indeed what they are saying. And perhaps that is why dialogue and discussion is important with them to ensure that we don't break the cordial relations that we have encouraged with that community since independence. That's my view on that matter.
Thank you very much. Good.
Dr. Kramer, let me put one in. A lot has been said about well, the whole point about rehabilitation, and well, let me start another way. If a prisoner was a shoemaker and he was in, he's in prison and he was making shoes in prison, nobody would really complain. Similarly, a tailor. So I wondered about how public has treated with the whole issue of Vybz Kartel as a musician, and the fact that he has obviously been allowed to produce music, because some of the music that has come out, he obviously has been able to do that in prison. Do you find that, how do you view that as part of, because people, if they can earn something in prison, it helps them to support, they still have families outside. And if they are going to come out at some, eventually, then it would mean that they also would need to have something for themselves at that point. I'm just wondering how you'll view that type of situation.
You raise a very important point, and that one is the issue of how you see the purpose of the prison service and how you encourage homegrown solutions to complex problems. The issue of one of our entertainers, Vybz Kartel, making music constantly, and I think not just this time, I think recently he gave an interview on international television is one of accountability, where clearly whoever has responsibility there needs to provide some accountability as to how these things happen without persons providing answers to them and consequences for those breaches happening. That's one. But two, the fact that is not to say that prisoners should not be allowed to do these kinds of initiatives. Sometimes innovations are identified in ways like this. And perhaps if he wants to make music, somebody should have a dialogue with not just him, but all others who may want to do similar. But what kind of music you're going to make, and what are we going to do with the proceeds of those music and in what communities? But it can't just be for Vibes Cartel because he is Vibes Cartel. It must be for all. So there must be a system, or it would be nice if there was a system identifying what is the added value, or what kind of skill a particular individual could have that could probably be monetized in their interest to, and in the interest of society that they're coming out to, and also to build their own skills. That's probably an innovative way to treat with a system that does not have a lot of resources. So I don't necessarily think that it should be disregarded, and a prisoner must just be locked down and not do anything. In fact, I think in the past, you would have sentences handed down with things like hard labor or community service, etc. But how are those things assessed and all of that in our community? I see Major Reese reminding us of something similar that was done with Jacure. So once there is a system that can allow these things to happen, I think it could be encouraged, but we need to be very careful that we don't generate an exceptionalism culture even within prison. It shouldn't be that some prisoners feel like, well, it's only cartel and Jacure can be allowed to do certain things. So there probably need to be a better eye as to how can something fairer be developed, where persons who want to make prisoners who may want to make proposals of initiatives for consideration could do so, and a framework could be developed as to how that could be used or monetized for the benefit of society and themselves.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor?
I think
We're gonna get
PD Dwayne wants to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, PD Dwayne.
PD Dwayne, are you still there?
Yes, good evening.
Go right ahead.
Everyone. So, Dr. Kramer, you in your presentation, I must say that I did enjoyed watching the presentation, and thank you for the stimulating conversation. In your presentation, you spoke to the concept of justice for all, and you went on to say that it is more aspirational, which I think nobody could contest that, certainly within the context of Jamaica. But I just wanted to pick your mind or your brain, or to hear what are your thoughts on the use of technology to increase access for justice for the most vulnerable and for the poor, and also based on your research and experience across the Caribbean islands. Is there any of those jurisdictions that have any kind of system that uses technology to enhance justice, the justice system, or access to justice for their people? And if so, what from that jurisdiction would you recommend that Jamaica could utilize. I think we've been trying to do something with it, but it's certainly not at the pace that we'd want it to be. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much for your question. Particularly with the onset of COVID-19, countries and spaces that have been very formalized have had no choice but to move to using innovations and such as technological innovations much more. I see Major is here saying that, you know, there have been video trials in some jurisdictions, and that has definitely been welcomed. The first time I saw it, actually, one of the areas where this was necessary, the first time during COVID-19, I was in Ghana for that very contentious elections that was held recently, where the result was not announced for months after, and contestations all the way up to the CCJ and back. And it was one for the recounting of ballots. Just imagine during the pandemic, the height of the start of the pandemic, and that in itself was very contentious, debating and negotiating how booths were set up and how the electoral space was to be set up to allow for the counting of ballots, and how that was going, whether there would be technology allowed to record what was going on, because a lot of persons could not be admitted to the circle as provided for in the provisions of the law because of the public health crisis. So they had to utilize innovations. And while it was not specifically allowed for in the law, the chair of the Electoral Commission had to use the discretionary powers allowed to her to say that she approved and she instructed the use of technology so that persons could have trust that the recount that they were seeing, they were able to watch it online, that they could trust the results coming out of a system like that. And then courts had to move online as well, because you could not have the usual system. So in where that is concerned, a lot of I know a number of Caribbean countries have moved to do that. I know that Antigua and Barbuda is putting some effort into also how to move, even out of the COVID period, to develop a more technologically friendly judicial system and space, so that, you know, much more persons were able to access justice, but to also help with the backlog of cases that they have, which is a challenge that I think exists in all Caribbean countries. Jamaica has a similar issue that, you know, we're struggling with, and which people think that, well, if you start a case now, that's not going to here for the next 10, 15 years. So I may as well try and find my own solution now, because by the time that happened, I'd be so angry and feeling distraught and so on. So all of these things, I think, is necessary and important. And perhaps one of the good things coming out of this crisis is the innovation of technology, where even employers before, who were not so welcoming of persons working outside of the physical workspace, were forced to see and test and try that. So I think that will be, that moving forward, that will be applicable across all areas, even in the education system. It's going to be difficult for us to just, I think, revert solely back to a solely face-to-face status quo. I think we have passed that stage, and there is going to be inevitably space for a hybrid system, especially when the business model and the gains financially are considered. Now that persons see that education can possibly be delivered online, you can probably, you know, persons that were trying that before But now, when cash-strapped universities and others see that they can offer courses not just to their own jurisdictions, but elsewhere and others, I think the next few years is going to be very interesting for fairness, etc. But that will also come with challenges, and is an area that will need to be monitored in how that is developed, fairness of access, and how those spaces are monopolized. Because if it becomes an important tool for service delivery, for access, and for public access, etc., then who holds the monopoly on the delivery of such technology is going to be very important.
Thank you, Dr. Kramer. I think we're gonna have to close. We're getting close to wrapping, but if there's one or at most two, we can certainly take, say, even two. So who is next?
May I quickly ask one, sir?
Yes, go right ahead.
Dr. Kramer. Hi, good night. You made mention of social cohesion. This conveys, at least to me, the notion of a willingness to participate and to cooperate, creating a sense of belonging. Now, against the background of CARICOM passports and justice in the Caribbean region, we understand that Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica had established diplomatic relations since the 1960s, about 1963. Yet there are still issues in trade and immigration. We hear stories of Jamaicans being turned away at TNT's airports, and we hear of Jamaican items being placed at the lowest levels or the lowest shelves, the hardest to reach shelves in supermarkets. In relation to Jamaicans being turned away for what may be frivolous reasons, are there other ways than, as you mentioned, peaceful dialogue or conversation to address such issues, ways that will, as you again mentioned, ensure that the common man feels and believes that justice has been served, and basically to feel that justice has been served? Or is this again just rational, something to be pursued and yet not attained?
Complex question, because in terms of justice, it is, I guess, how the common man, as you say, would feel that as a CARICOM citizen, and if they have a business, it is being fairly and justly allowed to thrive as another CARICOM citizen. But this is diplomacy, and inherent tensions in trade will always exist between countries, even within within the CARICOM region. That's one of the reasons why I think the CSME has been such a difficult thing to achieve. And some countries have already said they don't even think it is attainable anymore, and we should just focus on the key areas that we think we can do and forget about the rest. Let us see where that ends up. I mentioned earlier that the OECS has a view that anything that's developing there, they should have a particular leverage and space, and other countries may feel another way about it. There were some bright areas in the relationship between Trinidad and Jamaica recently, and so it is not inconceivable that it can be restored with the right approach and the right kind of discussion at the time. It may take a ripening of a particular situation for that to happen, but I have no doubt that eventually people will have to talk. Because on our own, in the event, we are all small states. And as much as us Jamaicans or Trinidadians or Barbadians, etc., we think that we are it. Singularly, it's very difficult, particularly on issues of trade and so on, for us to make any significant headway on our own. We do not have that clout. And so eventually, I'm optimistic that with the right discussion and right mood, that our leaders will have the conversations that they started some time ago, Trinidad and Jamaica, that is.
Okay, thank you. And one more? Is there one more? And then we can move to our vote of thanks. Okay, that seems to be it. Okay, let me call on DP Arturo, who has been designated to give the vote of thanks to Dr. Kramer. DP
Sure.
Arturo. Oh, is that Raleigh?
Yeah, I was trying to ask a question, but I guess
I couldn't. No, go ahead. I didn't hear you. I couldn't hear you. So go ahead.
Well, my question really is gonna open a brand new area, and maybe the doctor will come back to speak to us about needs and its implication on justice, particularly the point where if persons do not log in. The proposal is that they will be precluded from access to certain services and opportunity to do business. So it's going to impact the rollout of justice in a very significant manner. But I think that we need another session to address that situation.
I think so. I think that would probably be best. And I'm not necessarily sure I'm the best person to have that conversation. I could be a contributing voice, you know. You raise something, though, that is important in terms of how governments and how societies and those in charge are thinking of coming up with innovations that deal with present-day circumstances and situations. Today, I was shared draft legislation from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to deal with the issue of the COVID vaccine and how workers and employers will treat with that. And they're thinking of the sustainability of the nation state, the vulnerability that the vulnerable place they find themselves in, just coming out of a volcano, etc. They've already tabled legislation. So countries and elected governments will come up with these kinds of policies and innovations, and it's good for us to test them, talk about them, and debate, and see how they can be used in parts to help us to feel more fairly treated and to ensure that we all have access to justice. But they need to be done in a way where people feel that they don't necessarily infringe on their rights. But as I said, justice, some may say, is aspirational, and there has to be a balance, and governments will tell you their duty is to find that balance in the interest of all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again. And DP Arturo, over to you for the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, DP Stewart. Dr. Kramer, I must say that the presentation that you have given is beyond excellent. It was extremely comprehensive. And in fact, what it has left me with is how you're going to put together the wide-ranging issues that you have raised so that you can have some focus in dealing with, if you even manage to succeed in one of the issues that you have raised, you would have been quite successful. We really seriously wish to thank you for this extremely comprehensive presentation, which has now set our minds on fire for thought as to how we can contribute to the improvement in the system. And as we have seen on an international scale, probably moreover because of the pandemic, that a lot of things that we take for granted, and you raise the issue of voting and elections. Some of these things have come up again for debate in countries which we thought these issues were settled. And in fact, we here were sort of feeling a bit smug that we have overcome some of the more violent aspects of election. However, one of the things that I thought that I should, when you dealt with the Rwanda situation and the fact that justice for all is sort of an aspiration for most people. I saw a clip recently of a Jamaican, not born in Jamaica, but of Jamaican parent. His father is Jamaican, in fact, who became a barrister and left London and went, I think, to Uganda to try and train prisoners. Not try, he actually succeeded in training prisoners to get law degrees, and in fact, graduate. Number of them graduated as lawyers. They got the law degree from the University of London. And so they held classes, moot courts and all of that in the prison. And they were able to deal with their own situation in relation to appeals and the more technical aspects of their representation on behalf of one another. And in fact, it enabled some of them to come out and actually practice the law. And it would seem to me that right here, we have, as you have said, this congestion, traffic jam of cases in the courts at different levels that has led to the frustration of which President Richard has spoken of people seeking out their own solutions. So that may be something that needs to be investigated to see how it can assist in the working of the justice system here. And I'm happy also dealt with the Vibes Cartel issue that was raised by distinguished President Stewart. So we can only at this time wish you all the best in your new position as director of the university's Institute of Criminal Justice and Security. I had the fortune of meeting your predecessor, Professor Anthony Harriott. In fact, we regularly used to have discussions on these things. But as I said, the wide-ranging portfolio that you have taken on is one that is for the valiant and the young. And I see that you qualify in both in both cases. So we join here and wish you all the best and look forward to future presentations along the same vein as we go along, and wherever we can probably be of assistance. We in the terms of the contribution that we are trying to make to the society, will certainly see if we can take on these challenges and assist you in the whole social democratic governance issues that confront society at this time. So thank you very much. And as you will see, we have a certificate of appreciation, which is up on the screen. And while you are seeing the virtual certificate, we intend to present you with the live, real, hard copy one that you can retain in a place which you'd feel fit to put it in. So thanks again, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
Okay, thank you, Dipiatro, and President Richard, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I now invite PD Gladstone Mallet, our Sergeant at Arms, to preside.
Thank you, President Richard. Can everybody hear me? Am I being heard?
No.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I can just imagine if I was being heard. P.E. Paul, I'd like to start with you, sir. P.E. Paul, is he still with us?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Yes. I noticed, sir, in your welcoming the members, I noticed that this member from the university, I think from the Key Club, said that he was alone. You didn't correct him. You acknowledged that he was alone. He wasn't alone, sir. He was with us. He couldn't be alone if he was all with us, sir. So for your misleading him, $500 for that, sir. Kiwanian Andre Burton, are you there? Arsino Sawyers, 2 new Kiwanian that was installed last week.
Only one of those was last week, Sarge.
All right. We put that on the back burner for mention. DLG Willie. DLG Willie, I noticed that I want you to explain to me how could you make a mistake with DP Desmond and PD Gladstone? How could that be, sir? That's like from the south to the west. You're laughing. $500 for making that mistake, sir. Seems like you know something that I don't know. DP Artura. I thought we only had one guest speaker. I didn't know we had two, sir. I thought they asked you to do the vote of thanks, but you give another speech. $500 for that, sir. I don't say you're quite capable of doing that, you know, but this is not your night, sir. $500 for do that. And pay that forthwith. Okay, I'm trying to give a joke.
Plads Benny.
Yes, sir.
As the assistant Sarge, sir, I would like to know why PDT Ralston came on and misled us as Moto E play. He didn't rename himself. So when we wanted to call on him for certain duties, sir, we didn't know that he was here.
Okay, sir.
He has a new phone.
Noted, noted, sir. A teacher was in her class and she was watching her kids mark their exam paper. And she noticed a boy at the back took off his shoes. So she thought more or less that he was trying to be comfortable. So she didn't pay it any mind. But about another 5 minutes, she noticed he took off his shirt. So she got up from her seat and she was rushing down to the back when he pulled his belt and flipped his pants to take it off. And she said, "Stop, what are you doing?" He said, "Teacher, the next question on the paper says it has to be answered in brief."
I don't know if you're going to get
Nice,
100 for that.
Nice one.
Finds him. Somebody find him?
Yes, he should be fine.
Yes.
Find him.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Sarge. We're going to have notices and announcements and interclubbing opportunities. DLG Willie, over to you.
Thank you, President Richard. In respect to notices, just a reminder, on Sunday the 12th, September the 12th, we have Kiwanis for Disability Day church service at the Boulevard Baptist Church at 9 o'clock. Please note in your diaries, Sunday, September the 19th is our Divisional Council meeting, 4th quarter. On September 26th is the President's End of Administration Church service. And on Saturday, 25th of September, Division 23 Central, mass installation and changing of the guard. And so far as interclubbing opportunities, tomorrow we have 2 interclubbing opportunities. We have Trafalgar, begins at 7 p.m. And we also have an invitation from Junction South, Division 25, to attend their meeting. It starts at 8 o'clock. That's the notices and interclubbing opportunities present. You may want to open up if anybody else has any notices.
Yes, thank you. At this time, I'll invite any visiting clubs if they have any notices that they would wish mentioned. Okay.
President Richard?
Yes, go ahead.
Just want to appeal to
Haiti,
all of us.
yes.
Right, the
Yes.
Haiti earthquake relief project, which is on, and Division 23 Central. In fact, all the Kiwanis clubs in Jamaica, and it's been coordinated by LG Debbie, but for Division 23 Central, I'll be coordinating that on her behalf, of course, and some of our members have contributed, but for the other clubs, there are 13 clubs in the division. So just to say that I'll be communicating with them. I know the correspondence have been sent to them, so they are very much aware of it. But I just want to say thank you so far for the members of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston who have already contributed. I know you have contributed, President, among other persons, so we thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other announcements, DP Stewart, over to you for the thought of the week before termination.
Thank you, President Richard. As usual, I have 2 for you. And the first one is this: why we need mentors in our life. Those mentors in our life that help you succeed have hindsight. And if you use their hindsight for your foresight, you will have some insight on how to conduct your life. That's the first one. And the second one is, don't let the things you don't have cause you not to appreciate all of the blessings you do have. And those are my thoughts for the week, President.
Thank you very much. Fellow Kiwanians and guests, I invite you to, at this time, raise your glasses and drink a toast to Kiwanis International, Jamaica, land we love.
Land we love.
Kiwanis International, Jamaica, land we love.
This meeting of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston is hereby terminated.